Get ready to dive into a case that has haunted Melbourne, Australia for decades. The Tynong North and Frankston murders.
Yeah.
6 women vanished between 1980 and 81. Their bodies were found later in remote areas. The fear back then still lingers, and the puzzle is still unsolved.
It is.
So we're going to unpack the details, explore the victim stories, and delve into the why is there no resolution? What do you think happened? Share your theories down in those comments.
Yeah, that's what's fascinating. It really remains an open case, despite the years that have passed since the investigations. So many different threads to unravel, all the different victims, the timeline, the suspects. It's a real true crime labyrinth, this one.
It is. It is. So let's introduce the victims to our listeners. We have Allison Rook, 59 years old, whose car broke down. Bertha Miller, 73, on her way to church. Catherine Headland, just 14, heading to the bus stop. Anne Marie Sargent, 18, leaving an employment office. Nirmal Stevenson, 34, a mother of 2. She vanished after an argument with her husband. And lastly, Joy Summers, 55. She was waiting for a bus. Heartbreaking.
It is, and the fact that a lot of these women were just doing everyday activities, walking to places, makes their disappearances even more unsettling.
Right.
It really begs the question, was this a crime of opportunity? Was it somebody just preying on vulnerability? Or were these women specifically targeted? What do you guys think? Was there a pattern? Or was this just a really, really awful series of coincidences? Let us know in the comments.
It's chilling, right? To think something as routine as waiting for the bus could lead to something so awful. So let's walk through the timeline. I warn you, it gets even more unsettling. It all starts in May 1980 with the disappearance of Allison Rook. Her body was found months later. Then things escalate. August and October of the same year, we lose Bertha Miller, Catherine Headland, and Anne Marie Sargent. They were found together in December in Tynong North.
Right.
That cluster of discoveries, what does that tell us? 3 women found in the same location. What does that tell us about the perpetrator?
Well, it's definitely significant, isn't it? It could suggest a chilling efficiency. They abducted and murdered 3 women in a short amount of time. Or maybe they just found that location a very convenient disposal site. But either way, it's a disturbing picture.
It is. It is. But the timeline doesn't end there. November 1980, Nirmal Stevenson disappears. Her remains weren't found until February 1983.
Wow.
A 3-year gap.
Yeah.
What could explain that delay? Was it a change in the perpetrator's life?
Yeah.
A need to hold on to that particular victim's remains? It's a chilling deviation from the previous pattern.
Absolutely. Like, why? It just doesn't quite fit. Like, did something shift in their life? Was there a reason to keep her remains for that long? Makes it even more complex, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. Sadly, just a month before Narimal's body surfaces, in October 1981, Joy Summers vanishes. Her body's found a month later. 6 women, all gone, roughly within 18 months. A truly dark period in Melbourne's history. And here's another detail, the locations. We have this cluster in Tynong North, a rural area, but others are found in Frankston, which is more suburban. Could this tell us about the perpetrator's movements, their knowledge of these areas, or even their psychological state? What do you make of this geographical puzzle, listeners?
I mean, yeah, it's a crucial element. The locations, it suggests a possible connection to both areas. Maybe the perpetrator lived in one and they used the other for disposal. Or maybe they just chose these spots because they knew that they were isolated, suitable for hiding bodies. It adds a layer of premeditation that's unsettling.
It's like trying to decipher a code. Each detail, a potential clue.
Right.
Speaking of clues, let's talk about a name that surfaced during the investigation. Harold Janman.
Right, Janman. He was a local man known to offer rides to women, particularly along Frankston-Dandenong Road, which is significant because some of the disappearances happened around that area. So investigators were drawn to him, right? Because of that behavior and the potential access he had to the areas where the bodies were found.
Right. But despite being questioned extensively, he maintained his innocence. He died in 2020 with no conclusive link to the murders. Did his death offer any resolution, or did it deepen the mystery? Was Harold Janman a key player in this? Or was he just a red herring? Let us know down in the comments.
It's a question that we still have. For some people, maybe it did offer some sort of closure when he passed, but I don't think it provided any definitive answers. We still don't have concrete evidence connecting him to the crimes. It just leaves us with even more questions.
It's frustrating, especially for the families. They deserve answers. So let's explore some theories. One that can't be ignored. A serial killer.
Given the victims, all women, most alone, and the circumstances surrounding their abductions and the locations of their bodies, I mean, yeah, it does suggest a pattern of behavior, a chilling level of premeditation.
It is. It's a
Yeah.
terrifying thought. What patterns do you see in this case, listeners? Let us know in the comments.
What's interesting is the apparent randomness of the victims. Like their ages were different, different backgrounds, different locations. It makes it really hard to establish a clear motive or a connection between them. It challenges our understanding of a typical serial killer.
It really does. It's a puzzle within a puzzle. This case just gets more complex and impact on the community. How do unsolved crimes like this affect people in the long term?
Yeah, I think it leaves a scar, you know,
Mhm.
creates unease and fear, especially for those who live through it. It's a constant reminder that there are unanswered questions, that the perpetrator might still be out there.
And for the victims' families, the pain must be unimaginable. Not knowing what happened, being denied closure, heartbreaking.
Absolutely. It leaves the families in limbo, always searching for answers that may never come. Their suffering extends way beyond the initial crime.
It does. It's a stark reminder of the human cost of these mysteries. You know, we've only scratched the surface of this complex case, but we're going to have to pause here. We'll be back in the next part of our deep dive to explore even further.
Yeah, we'll delve deeper into the investigations, examine the evidence, and look at different perspectives on what might have happened. Keep those theories coming, listeners. Your insights are invaluable. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Tynong North and Frankston murders. Just a reminder, every detail, every observation could be a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So if something pops into your head, you have a thought or a hunch, please don't hesitate to leave it in the comments below.
Absolutely. We're all in this together. Before the break, we touched on the victims, that timeline, and Harold Janman.
hmm
But what was the investigative process like back then? I imagine it was a lot different from today.
Oh, yeah. This was the early 80s. Forensic technology was, well, it was basically in its infancy compared to what we have now.
Yeah.
So investigators really relied on those traditional methods, fingerprints, blood typing, and good old witness statements.
Right.
Can you imagine, listeners? No DNA analysis, no fancy computer databases,
Wow.
just painstaking, detailed work.
It must have been like searching for a needle in a haystack,
Right.
especially with limited physical evidence because of, well, the time that elapsed between disappearances and discoveries.
Yeah.
What kind of clues did investigators have to go on?
Despite the challenges, some key bits of information did come up.
Right.
For instance, Allison Rook's car. It was found abandoned near where her body was discovered, suggesting she might have been abducted right there.
Oh, wow.
And the cause of death for many of the victims?
Yeah.
Strangulation.
Oh.
This pointed to a possible MO, the Latin term for modus operandi. Basically, it's the perpetrator's consistent way of doing things. It suggests a pattern, a signature.
Strangulation. That's so personal, so violent. What does that tell us? Could it point to a crime of passion, some sort of need for control? What do you think, listeners? Could the choice of strangulation tell us something about the killer's personality or their motives?
I mean, strangulation often points to a more intimate attack. You need to be close to the victim, and it suggests the comfort level with that violence.
Right.
Even perhaps a desire to be dominant, in control. It's a chilling detail and adds to the profile we're trying to build here.
It is chilling.
Yeah.
And all these women were found in remote areas, carefully hidden. What does that say about the perpetrator's resources, their planning? Did they have a car? How did they choose those locations? Were they familiar or was it random? It's a real puzzle.
Choosing the location, always significant. It can offer insight into their knowledge, habits, even their state of mind.
Yeah.
In this case, the remote areas definitely suggest familiarity with the area and probably access to a vehicle. They weren't just dumped anywhere.
It almost feels like they were trying to erase the bodies, make them vanish. And the fact that some were clustered together in Tynong North,
Yeah.
was that just convenience? Or did the location hold some sort of significance for them?
It's baffled investigators. Some say the site might have meant something, maybe a childhood memory or a place they spent time. Maybe it was a sense of control, of ownership over the crimes.
It's like their own twisted graveyard, almost.
Mm.
We've talked a lot about Harold Janman, but did the investigators ever find any direct links to the victims?
Well, Jamin was known to frequent the areas. He even offered rides to women.
Right.
Some witnesses put him near where the victims disappeared,
Right.
but there wasn't enough evidence to definitively link him.
So there was a lot of circumstantial evidence,
Yeah,
but nothing to make an arrest.
right.
Could Janman have been involved, despite the lack of proof? Or was he simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments.
Even without a direct link, his behavior was suspicious.
Right.
Being there raised red flags, maybe he had information, but his unwillingness to cooperate or his potential involvement, still a mystery.
It's like a puzzle piece that just won't fit.
Yeah.
Another thing, that 3-year gap between Narumul Stevenson's disappearance and finding her remains, why keep her so long? It's different from the others.
Yeah, it really is one of the most perplexing parts of this case. Makes you wonder, did her disappearance trigger a change, an escalation, maybe even a break?
And she was a Thai immigrant.
Right.
Could that have played a role? Was she targeted because of that? Was there a hate element to this? What do you think, listeners?
It's definitely something they would have looked at, but there isn't evidence to suggest she was targeted specifically because of her race or background. The motives are they're so elusive.
It's like trying to understand the mind of a ghost, you know? You see what they leave behind, but you never truly get them.
Yeah, it is a constant what if. Lots of dead ends.
But even with the challenges, it seems the investigators haven't given up. They increased the reward, and technology has come a long way.
It has.
Who knows what breakthroughs are possible?
DNA analysis, for example, it's been revolutionary. Even with old samples, there's a chance it could provide a link,
Yeah.
even lead to a suspect. It's a glimmer of hope in a very dark story.
That glimmer of hope is essential, not just for the families, but for the whole community.
Right.
The pursuit of justice, no matter how long it takes, shows how much we value human life and the need for accountability.
Absolutely.
These cases remind us that even in dark times, the pursuit of truth and justice, it has to continue. It's about remembering the victims, making sure their stories aren't forgotten.
You're exactly right.
It's a heavy topic, but so important. As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm left feeling, I don't know, a mix of sadness for those lives lost, frustration with all the unanswered questions, but also that flicker of hope.
Yeah. We can't let those stories fade away.
Right.
We need to keep asking those questions, keep the pressure on, and never lose hope for a resolution. And listeners, we need your help.
Absolutely. Share your thoughts, your theories, anything, even a tiny detail. That just feels art. You never know. That little piece of information might unlock the whole thing. We'll be back in the final part to explore the impact this had on everyone. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. We've covered a lot, haven't we?
We have.
The victims, the timeline, those possible suspects, the investigations. But there's something we haven't really explored. The impact of these crimes on the community.
Yeah.
And most importantly, on the families of the victims.
You're right. These things, they don't just fade away. They leave a mark.
Yeah.
A sense of vulnerability, of fear that can, well, it can grip a community for years.
Imagine living in Melbourne during that time. Would you feel safe walking alone? Would you even let your kids go to the bus stop?
Right.
Must have been terrifying for everyone. What about you, listeners? Did you live through this? How did it change your life? Did you feel that shift? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
The ripple effect is profound. It erodes trust. It can change how people behave, create this climate of fear that's hard to shake off.
It really is. People become more wary, don't they?
They do.
More suspicious. That has a lasting impact, doesn't it?
Definitely.
On a community sense of safety. And for the families of the victims, the pain is just unimaginable.
It is.
To lose someone so tragically and then no answers. No closure. It's an incredible burden to carry.
It is. And not knowing, not having that closure, it prevents them from grieving, from finding peace.
Yeah.
Knowing that whoever did this is potentially still out there living their life, it just adds another layer of injustice to it all.
It really is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It reminds us that behind every unsolved case, behind those statistics, there are real people.
Yeah.
Whose lives were cut short, whose families were left to pick up the pieces. We have to remember that.
Absolutely. We have to remember their stories, not just for the tragedy, but for the lives they lived.
Right.
The impact they had.
What can we learn from these cases? They happened decades ago. But are there things we can still apply today? Things to prevent similar tragedies? What do you think, listeners? What can we do to protect the most vulnerable in our communities?
I think staying vigilant, being aware, that's crucial. These crimes, they often happen right in front of us. And sometimes even the smallest detail someone notices could be huge for investigators.
So if you see something, say something. Don't just ignore things that seem odd.
Exactly.
No matter how small. It could be that missing piece.
It really could. We also can't forget personal safety.
Right.
Being aware of your surroundings, trusting your gut, don't hesitate to take precautions, especially when you're alone.
It's always better to be safe than sorry.
Absolutely.
And there's always hope, isn't there? Technology keeps advancing. DNA analysis, that's been huge in solving cold cases.
It has.
There's always a chance new evidence will turn up.
Mm.
A witness might remember something.
Mm.
That's why it's important to keep these cases alive.
It is. We can't let them fade away.
We have to keep asking those questions, keep the pressure on, and keep hoping for that resolution. So listeners, what are your takeaways? What really stuck with you about this case? Any theories? Lingering questions? Share them in the comments. Your insights are valuable. They might spark something new.
Every voice counts. Even if you don't have direct information, being engaged, raising awareness, it helps. It keeps the pressure on to find those answers.
And remember, no detail is too small. If you think you have something, anything at all that could be relevant, contact Crime Stoppers. That number is 1-800-333-1000. Your call could be what finally solves this mystery, brings closure to the families who've waited so long.
These women deserve justice. We need to remember their stories.
And we can't give up hope.
We can't.
For more stories, subscribe to the Forgotten Murders podcast or visit ForgottenMurders.com. We'll keep digging deeper, searching for answers, shedding light on cases that time has tried to bury.
Thanks for joining us. Let's keep the conversation going.